interesting going to 7 Remake after playing 16.
I can imagine, because like we'll discuss it more, but the thing about the 7 Remake is it was already kind of you can tell they want to make it an action game. Like they really like the action game part of it more,
right.
Even more so than like they still care a little bit about the RPG stuff, but they're like, this is the appeal of this is the action stuff. And so 16 is the first one where it's like, this is kind of just an action game. And so they go really hard on that. So I'm sure to go back to 7, which is still kind of like it's got its feet in both.
Well, and just also how 16, the whole push was that it was like the first M-rated, like mature, gritty. But then you go back to 7 Remake, and other than the F word, like
no, it's very much the funny thing I think about a lot of M-rated games. There's a handful that are like buckets of blood and naked people and whatnot. But for the most part, most M-rated games are basically like hard PG-13s.
Right.
And Final Fantasy VII Remake was already that. Like it was already like, yeah, this is like a little bit more intense than a Marvel movie.
Like when they're shooting and they're like killing people on the pillar.
Yeah.
But there's no blood or like gore. Yeah. It's like there's the line.
Yeah. No, we went as far as we could. Cloud doesn't decapitate anyone with the big sword.
Exactly.
But he will still hit them with a big sword.
Whereas like in the first 5 minutes of 16, Clive says F like 6 times in a row to just be like, hey guys, it's real this time. It's M.
Yeah. These two characters, they're having sex like right over there. And it's like...
Yeah, the sex was the part that I mean, we talked about it on my episode that I did, but it was like they were still too afraid to cross that line.
Yeah,
like,
that's, I think...
The nudity in that game was still very tasteful and...
No, that's I think most video games. That's why I think Baldur's Gate got like such a hubbub over its set, because it's just like it is like R-rated sex, and every other video game, even the M-rated ones, they're like, well, we don't do that. Remember when the first Mass Effect came out and it had sex scenes in it? It's rated M, and everyone was like up in arms because you could have sex in this video game, and then like the actual scenes in questions are like network television sex scenes where it's like they make out a little bit and someone takes their shirt off and then that fades
like
to black.
Blacks out. Yeah.
It's just a weird tick with video games in general, I think. But yeah, no, I'm sure it's also I haven't played 16. I get the feeling I will probably like it more than most people, but I also I feel like probably going back to 7 Remake, the story was probably a little bit more like better because,
the story for 7 Remake.
Yeah.
Yes, but I can definitely see the drawn out nature of the remake now, because it's like,
well, because 16
was
a
complete story.
Yeah, 7 is part 1 of 3.
Yeah, and also I think 7 feels more anime now, whereas 16 was definitely going for more of like network television.
Yes.
I mean, they straight up said we want to do Game of Thrones.
No, and we discussed this at just in person a couple weeks back, where it's just sort of like 16 also took a cue from Xenoblade Chronicles and a couple other series where it's like we got like a British actors to do all the parts, and I don't know what the deal is with that, but every time I've seen British actors do a JRPG dub instead of American actors, it comes across so much more naturally. There's not like the anime voice kind of overlay. It's just like, oh, that fits weirdly naturally. Like even the more kooky stuff, kooky British weirdly lines up with kooky Japanese a lot more than kooky American. I don't know what it is, but there's something about it that's just like, yeah, that fits. That feels a lot more natural.
Yeah. Well, maybe this episode will just have a cold open. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the neighborhood, and thank you for spending part of your day with us today. If you're a returning listener, or if this is your first time here, thank you so much for listening. Now, it's time to grab your ridiculously oversized sword, style your hair just right, pretend you don't care even though you really do, and talk to a therapist about those hallucinations, because on this episode, we're talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Welcome to the podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
Final Fantasy VII Remake is an action role-playing game created by Square Enix and released for PlayStation 4 in April 2020. An enhanced version, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, was released for PlayStation 5 and Windows in 2021. It is the first in a planned trilogy of games remaking the 1997 PlayStation game Final Fantasy VII. Set in the dystopian cyberpunk metropolis of Midgar, players control the mercenary Cloud Strife. He joins Avalanche, an eco-terrorist group trying to stop the powerful mega-corporation Shinra from using the planet's life essence as an energy source. Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced in 2015 following years of speculation. It received positive reviews, with praise for its graphics, gameplay, narrative, and music. Critics praised the expanded story and the updated battle system for its strategic elements and visual flourishes. But the linearity and repetitive side quests received criticism. The game became one of the fastest-selling PlayStation 4 games by selling over 3.5 million units within 3 days and over 7 million units by September 2023. Now, if I decided to do a cold open, you've already heard his voice, but Dylan is not here because he got sick, actually. But we're already planning on bringing on friend of the show, Level Playing Field co-host from back in the day, Caleb Van Ice, to talk about this game. So, Caleb, how's it going?
It's going. I'm alive. That's all I can ask, and I'm here to talk about Final Fantasy VII, which is one of my favorite things, so I'm always down for that.
Yeah, I really couldn't think of a better person. I know I had you and Alex both come on Level Playing Field when we did the episode for it back then, which I attempted to do a Let's Play for that game for our YouTube channel at the time, which
I remember that.
Replaying the game now just as sit really poor posture on the couch,
right? Just sort of slack and just like play the game with a beer and some snacks and be like,
just enjoy it and play for 4-hour blocks and not be trying to think of commentary that I was not good at and probably still am not good at. It's been I'm glad I went back to it and experienced it this way.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember that because I listened to the first 15 minutes of that old podcast last night. I was doing some other stuff and I'm like, I've actually, we'll talk about it. You've recently replayed the game. I haven't, simply because I thought about it. At the end of last year, I was getting really excited for Reborn, and I was like, do I want to replay Remake? And I sat there and I thought about it. And there was a bunch of other games I had lined up that I was going to play, and I knew I'd have to put all of those on the back burner to do it. And I was also really worried. I try to vary up what games I play. So it's I play this, and then I play this, and then I play this. And they're different genres, or they're different. Right. Even if they're in the same series, I don't really usually do marathons of playing two games back to back. I might play a similar genre game, but I was worried I'd be so excited. And for Reborn, I'd sit there and play through Remake, play through the DLC again. And then I'd be like, I'm good, actually. I'm content. And then I wouldn't be it would take me too long to get around to Reborn. So I'm excited for that. I want to play that. Mm-hmm. I'll hold off on Remake for a little bit. So it's actually kind of a similar thing where last time I had played Remake right as it came out, burned through it. And it was basically all I did for that, it was a month block where that was it. I played Remake. I went to work, came home, played Remake, went to work, come home, played Remake. And then you were doing the commentary. So at the time we recorded that episode, I had played all the way through it. My brother had then sat down and played all the way through it. And then we were just waiting on you to play through it. And you're like, hey, you want to talk about Final Fantasy VII Remake? Yes, please. I have been waiting to talk about this for forever.
Yeah, so I did a replay. I'm actually currently in my replay. Last time I played, which is probably a couple days ago at this point, I got to kind of the point of no return. Where you scale the wall and go up.
Yep.
But I haven't gotten to Shinra yet.
Gotcha.
So I'm in that intermittent traveling through the sky kind of phase. But I did do all of the side quests and everything this time, whereas last time I got to the point in that third chunk of side quests where I just
where it
moved
kind of
on.
lets you have both of them, where it's just sort of like, hey, whatever you want to do before the story just kicks into high gear and you can't come back, do it now. Like, because if I'm remembering correctly, it kind of lets you have both side quest hubs and a couple other like scattered areas in like a
Yeah, because that's when you unlock fast travel.
yeah,
is in
yeah,
that,
that's what I thought.
third.
So it's just like, yeah, it's like, here's the entirety of the world map up to this point. Here's everything you can do. Anything you missed the last couple times you've been through here, do this now.
plus a set of like new / finishing up quest lines. Like each time they give you like the open areas to explore, there's like 6 or so side quests.
Right.
And this was, but the first time I played it, I was just so ready to finish that I just kind of blitzed through and just mainlined from that point, which I think made the game a little tougher for me because you get some
nice gear. Yeah. I actually, I have a note on that I'll come back to, but like I can actually relate to that a little bit more now, more than I could at the time, because I didn't do everything. I did not 100% remake when I played it, but I did like kick around for a while in all of those side quest hubs. I did actually kind of sink my teeth into them. I just did it at the pacing level of, as soon as I start to get like a little bored, even if I've got more stuff to do, I'm like, well, I'm going to move on now. Like I broke myself a long time ago of the habit I had as a kid where it's like I have to do everything all the time. Like it's got to be a checklist. It got to a point when I was in high school where I just would stop and go, this isn't fun anymore. I'm not having a good time.
Right.
Like I'm sitting here, I guess I got to play this stupid game and do the thing. And I'm like, well, I was liking this 3 hours ago. What happened? It's like, well, you don't really want to do this. So I played most of the side quest stuff, but this might be a non-ice cold take given what you already said. The side quests in Final Fantasy VII Remake are not the strongest part of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah.
I love this game a lot, but I will go, oh, okay. They really wanted to be The Witcher. They saw how The Witcher did things and they said, oh, we want in on that. That seems cool. And they did not pull it off, not even remotely.
No, and I think it's a weak spot for 16 as well, but I feel like maybe just for this, because they're remaking an old game and this is like the linear introduction section, it's like maybe they should have leaned into the linearity a little bit more instead of trying to give you these branching things. Before we like dive too deep into the conversation though, I do want to mention for anybody listening, the way we're going to structure our conversation here, this game is pretty old, and it's also based on a really old game. The first half of this conversation, we're going to talk kind of top level, spoiler free, give our thoughts on, more mechanical stuff, visuals, things like that aren't, doesn't touch the story. In the back half of the conversation, though, we will spoil. I want everything to be on the table because at this point, Final Fantasy VII is a series in and of itself, and so we will potentially spoil the original. We will potentially spoil Crisis Core, the movies, whatever is related to. I'm not saying that we will and we're intentionally going to, but like it's all going to be on the table when we get to that part. But we will give a very obvious spoiler warning. There will be a break with some music, whatever, if you want to dip out and come back later. But I just wanted to get that out there before, we just got caught up in conversation and just kept on rolling. But for this first part, we're going to kind of keep things spoiler free. Usually where I start this is just like our history with the franchise. You've already mentioned that Final Fantasy VII is one of your favorite things to talk about. So why is that?
Well, it's partially because of this game. So I've known what Final Fantasy as a concept was since you can't not be into gaming like on a more than a surface level and not have at least heard of it. Yeah. Like it's just one of those, it's one of those institutional franchises where like, even if you don't care about RPGs at all, even if you don't play them, you've heard someone mention a Final Fantasy thing before. You may not have even known that someone talks about a Chocobo or something and you're like, sure, man, I don't know.
It's just one of those iconic names like Grand Theft Auto, Final Fantasy. Like there are just some staples of video game franchises that kind of transcend.
Right. So that was what it was for me for a good chunk of my life. I just like, I knew there was a series called Final Fantasy. Didn't know anything about it. Was too scared to look into it very much because there was not like an easy jumping in point if you didn't already have it. I didn't have a PlayStation, so the big jumping in point for most people was Final Fantasy VII. And I didn't play I've never been great at RPGs. I like RPGs. I'm just not good at them, and I tend to have the pull more towards like action adventure sort of games or platformers, stuff like that. So on the Super Nintendo, I didn't even accidentally stumble upon the two Final Fantasy games they had for that in America. So I kind of skipped all the easy entry points into Final Fantasy. And then if you don't know anything about Final Fantasy on the internet circa like 2004, you're lost. It's just like, well, should I play Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy X-2? You know, I remember very clearly having a Nintendo Power issue with like a big spread on like advertising the upcoming Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and I'm like, what is this? Like, is this a spinoff? I imagine The Legend of Zelda Once Upon a Time was a similar sort of thing where it's just sort of like, can I play this Twilight Princess without playing any of the other ones and that sort of thing? Now it's a bit easier because everyone knows they're so disconnected, and you can just point to like Breath of the Wild and be like, play this one. This is the easy entry point. But at the time, I was kind of becoming aware of Final Fantasy VII that didn't really exist for me. I didn't know what any of it was. It scared me. Eventually, though, you start paying attention. It's like the one everyone seems to point to is 7. 7 is the easy entry point. So I got a PlayStation 3. And they had the PS1 Classics line on the digital storefront, and I bought Final Fantasy VII, and I thought, I'm going to play this at some point. Like, I just to play through it. Again, I'm bad at RPGs, but I'm like, this seems like one of those things. Like, if there's like 100 video games to play before you die, this is one of them. So I'm like, all right, I picked it up. And then before I ever like actually sat down to make the time to play it, my brother did. He adored it. He spent his entire summer one year just like he had a summer job. He'd come home and he'd play Final Fantasy VII. I had a summer job. I'd come home. He was in the middle of Final Fantasy VII, and I just like, all right, well, I'm going to go hang out somewhere else because I have listened to this battle music for 3 weeks at this point. That's actually skipping ahead. That's a credit to this game's music. I love the music in Final Fantasy VII original. I've really warmed up to it. There's a lot to love there, but it is a credit to the Final Fantasy VII Remake's soundtrack that it got to the point where like it would play the reorchestration of the battle music, and I would get hype because that entire summer I was just so sick of the for hours on end because battle and then break and then battle and then break. So to cut to the chase, he played through it. My sister played through it. I was going to play through it, but then by that point the remake had been announced and it was getting close to coming out, and I'm like, I'm not going to finish this thing before the remake comes out. I'll be the test subject. You guys already know everything that's going to happen. I'll be the test subject. I'll play the remake first and just like kind of see how I take it in versus you guys. And so I loved it. And then I have played some more Final Fantasy games. I've not been I'm bad at RPGs, so it takes me forever to get through any of them. And I have a terrible habit, especially with RPGs, but in games in general, of like starting a game, getting like 8 hours into it, being like, I like this, and then getting distracted by something else. So like, I technically own copies of Final Fantasy 10, 12, 16, 4. Like, I have a bunch of Final Fantasy games sitting there being like, play me. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. At some point. I did finally last year. For the past year and a half, I have been going through just a whole bunch of like that list I made up a minute ago of 100 games to play before you die. I've been like specifically 90s and like early aughts games that I've missed, like the original Resident Evil, the original Metal Gear Solid, Super Metroid, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Been playing through all those, beat those ones specifically, and Final Fantasy VII was in that list. So I just played the original Final Fantasy VII late last year.
Nice.
I had a great time, but that's why I can relate to you because we can pull it apart a little bit more in a minute. I ran into the same thing where I kind of was like in a hurry to get through at a certain point where I was like, I want to play other things. I'm enjoying this, but like, let's hurry along. And so I kind of sped through a good chunk of like the middle third of 7. And then when you got like to the back fifth, I was struggling a lot because I had been like, yeah, I'm just going to speed through and do this and do this and do this. And it lets you do that because Final Fantasy VII, the original, has the reason I don't mind the new games being a trilogy is because there's a lot that goes on in that first game. So it's very easy to just like, well, I'm not going to do all the side quests because if I walk over here to the story thing, 18 things happen. And then, it only takes a couple hours before the next major thing happens. And then the next major thing happens. So it's really addictive to just like keep following the story threads. And you're really supposed to kind of like luxuriate it a little bit and like go poke around in the different areas and explore the towns and do the little side quests. And I stopped doing that at a certain point. And I was like, let's just go through it. And then, like I said, you get to like that last chunk of the game. And I'm just like, I'm getting my butt kicked all of the time.
Yeah, there's so many weapons and things. And we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But that I just didn't even really experience in my first playthrough when I did Remake. But also this time around, like I'm digging into the combat and the materia and that kind of stuff a lot more and understanding it a lot better. And I think a lot of that is because I'm just playing it like a game and not trying to sit there and make content out of it.
Yep.
I was similar to you where I had never played the original. And so I thought, why would I go back to that old, like blocky, goofy looking game when they're remaking it? And now I'm kind of like, man, do I still kind of need to go back and play that old blocky looking game? Because this remake is a new thing. It's not.
Yes. No, I didn't want to. This is not a spoiler at this point, but it's just sort of like Final Fantasy VII Remake
is like a separate series or
an
addition.
It's not like just a straight up remake of Final Fantasy VII. It kind of is playing with the fact that like, oh, Final Fantasy VII, one of the most famous games of all time. You know how this is going to go, right? And it's like, well, now you don't.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to obviously spoil like why that is or what causes that, but I think that is pretty like common knowledge at this point that they're playing with what is a remake,
right? And when kind of your expectations where you're like, some people who sit down to play this remake is like, I've played the original like 20 times. I've played it once a year since it came out. Like I nothing this game can do can surprise me. And it's like, are you sure about that?
Yeah, exactly. They're intentionally toying with that, which for me coming to it, I was like initially kind of bummed that I wasn't experiencing the super famous video game that had passed me by in like a modern HD setting. But I think because this is such a rare thing and it's such a weird idea, I appreciate it more for what it is versus not getting just a pretty way to play the original.
I think this is the best possible option. Like you could deliver just like what people wanted, which was basically when the clamor for a Final Fantasy VII Remake started, it was like during the PS2 era. Basically like Final Fantasy X came out and they're like, this game's awesome. Can you imagine if they did like Final Fantasy VII, the one everyone loved, the classic, the whatever, it's like, but it looked like this. And, with PS2 graphics, still nice. Alex actually played through Final Fantasy X last year while I was playing through Final Fantasy VII. And I watched a bit of it. It's like, it does look nice, even for a PS2 game. But like, people just were like, yeah, just spruce up the character models and just make the same game. And it's like, that probably would have been fine. That probably would have been perfectly okay. But like at this point, if you're going to spend as much money and effort as they're going to, it's like, you can't do that. That's kind of boring. You have to do something more interesting. And so they did. They took the more interesting, slightly riskier path. And it's like, yeah, I like this better. Like even, especially now having played the original. And I'm at this point incredibly charmed by especially the more blocky little guys. Because there's the fun thing about the original Final Fantasy VII is it's kind of a mixed media project. It's like, oh yeah, there's like the 2D art, but then there's the models they have when they're on the map, which is the little blocky Lego looking dudes. But then there's the slightly nicer looking models they have during the battle scenes, which are like a little bit more stretched out. And then there's like a handful of cutscenes where they're like, we spent a lot of money on this, and it still is PS1 graphics, so it's only looks so good. But it's like, no, this looks way nicer than it normally does. We couldn't afford to do this all the time, but for like 4 scenes, we can do this. So there's something kind of charming about the way it just is. It feels like people playing with the edge of what was possible with the technology at the time. And at this point, it's like, I know, I love the little Lego brick looking cloud. I find it incredibly charming. But no, even now having played through the story of the original, I'm happy that it's like, oh yeah, I'm even more glad we're getting this, where it's like, we're still doing a remake. You're still getting to see the stuff that made everyone cheer the first time around, but we're doing something else with it.
Yeah. Something you mentioned about kind of going like the style of the original. There have been moments now playing the remake where I'm like, I can see this like entering Corneo's for the first time and like Leslie standing there with the two goons on either side and just like walking into that room and the music change and all that. It feels like they 1-to-1 took that scenario from the original and just made it look modern, but it still kind of plays like a classic video game. And there's so many moments going through it this time where I'm like, I can see how that slightly like awkward feeling that I'm having right now is because this is like a 1-to-1 translation of a really old situation that they like kept true.
Yes, no, there's a lot in there that and I like a lot of it. Some of it it's like
I don't think it's a bad thing.
But no, there's a lot of it where I was actually impressed, where even playing it the first time, haven't played through the original at that point, I'm like, this is not an insult. This is a compliment. I have not played a game that felt like a PS1 title in a very long time. Like,
yeah, and you like there's just certain conversations or situations that would have felt more more natural in whatever that visual style / perspective / reading the dialogue. Whereas when you give it this like over the top Barrett voice actor like delivery, it's kind of like, I mean, I'm enjoying this, but I can definitely see where making that big of a jump can create a little bit of awkwardness sometimes.
Yes, no, the original, this is a fun fact I learned about the original Final Fantasy VII. That was a very quick translation job. Like the original Final Fantasy VII, they did not have a whole lot of time. Like they used to. This is part of the reason why the numbering got screwed up. Text-heavy games took longer to go across there because you had to reprogram it. You had to do all that stuff, but then you also had to have a guy sit down who knew Japanese and English. Could be like, all right, this is what they're trying to say. Like, this is what this means in English. Let me tweak it, whatnot. So if you're trying to get it out the door faster, so it can keep up with technology, so you're not releasing a PS1 game when the PlayStation 2 is out. It's like, all right, we got to do this quickly. I want to say it was one guy who did all of Final Fantasy VII, the original translation. And I want to say, I don't even think he had 2 months. I think he had to just like, here it is. Here's the date we need the translated, like a disc with the translated Final Fantasy VII script. Get to work.
I feel like that wasn't that uncommon back then. I mean, thank goodness for AI now, right?
No, it was. Now, people value it so much, and now it's a kind of the internet exists, so we would know if like, oh yeah, they dropped this game in Japan 6 months ago, and we still don't have it in the States. It's like, you can't do that. You can now. It's more common. It's like, it comes out March 23rd. In which regions? All of them. It comes out March 23rd. Like, that's the end of the story. So you can't really get away with that now. So now you have teams. You have a bunch of people who are working with, like, they're recording the English dialogue at the same time they're recording the Japanese dialogue. Like, they're working on it almost simultaneously. But at the time, they're just like, here you go, man. You have 6 weeks. Go nuts. And so there's a lot of playing through the original Final Fantasy VII. It's very charming, but there is a lot of stuff in there where you're just sort of like, that's not a sentence a real human would say. That is a strange choice, because that guy's like, I could spend an extra like 15 minutes trying to hammer out like a better way to phrase this, or I could move on to the next page of dialogue I have to translate.
Yeah, but like, speaking of translating just the game to looking like a modern game, Final Fantasy VII Remake is one of the best looking games.
It's gorgeous.
And I played, so my replay I'm doing right now is on the PlayStation 5 version. It's the best it can possibly be, but I honestly don't feel like, maybe if I looked side by side, I don't feel like it's stepped up that much from the PS4. Like, the game looked incredible, with the exception of some NPCs and some side stuff, which is, I feel like, a Square thing, because 16 is basically the exact same.
That is my big little, like, a little bugbear with this game, is because it is one of the best looking games on the market right now. It's beautiful, beautiful game. And then it's really funny. You go through like one of the nice set pieces and you're like, this is the best video games have maybe ever looked. And then you go into one of the towns and it's mostly beautiful. And then you go look and it's like, well, that little chunk over there looks kind of boring. Like someone just said, we need a building there and so slap there. It's like, it's whatever, it's a town. You got to do what you do. And then you go talk to an NPC and you're like, you get like how good, like especially the player characters look. I was watching, because I didn't replay it recently, I've been watching a bunch of little clips here and there and some other commentators and some reviews on it and whatnot, just to kind of freshen up my memory.
Did you go watch my Let's Play?
I did not, because I did not have enough time.
Nobody watched that Let's Play.
You ruined your initial experience of this game for yourself, for the benefit of other people, and they're all like, "No, we're good, thanks, man."
Yeah,
like,
no, you're bad at this.
No, but I was watching one of the ending cutscenes, and the Barrett model, I was like, "Holy crap! Like, what on earth?" They just like, I did a double take. I was like, "Oh, right, that looks good." But you have that. And then you go talk to an NPC, and I'm like, this reminds me of when I would playing Sonic Adventure, like, and just go talk to little things. Just like
savage.
It's really bad. It's not just that they look worse; they do a little bit, but like the animations are so canned. It's got like kind of a Oblivion vibe to it, where it's like, "Hello, traveler, how can I help you?"
I made this comparison on our Final Fantasy 16 episode because it's the exact same thing. I mean, it's budgetary, right? So. It reminds me of like watching anime, and it's like, this is the episode where they like spent all their time and money. Like you can tell this was the combat sequence or this was whatever. And then you have 2 episodes of like still characters, like, just kind of talking to each other because they had to cut corners there.
I remember specifically during the COVID season of My Hero Academia, me and my siblings watched that, whenever a new season comes out. And during COVID, the season they produced during COVID, you kind of expected some budget cuts because, in some workflow differences. So like you kind of got used to like, yeah, all right, doesn't look as good as it normally does, but it looks fine or whatnot. And then there was a couple episodes that looked like slightly worse than normal. And then you had one episode that looked magnificent. Like it just looked, oh, holy crap. This is not just like this is not just the best looking episode of the season. This is the best episode. Like this is in the top 10 best animated episodes they've ever done. It looks gorgeous. And it was for no reason. Like it's not, there's a cool moment, but it's not like a huge story important moment. It's just like, yeah, they decided they had to pick one, and they're like, we like this one the best out of this stretch. And so they just nailed it. And then the next episode looked kind of like garbage. And it was just sort of a thing where you're like, yeah, all right. That was not something to get used to. That was.
Yeah. And I mean, it's something that's in video game, like all video games, especially really big ones like this, but to different degrees. And Square very obviously is like, there's a cutscene I want to talk about in the spoiler section that was like so good that it was jarring.
Yeah.
And then there's the NPCs on ground level. But I did want to mention, like, no matter what you're doing in this game, and no matter something I've noticed on this replay, the way that the visuals and the audio design work together, and then the way that just like you can tell there was so much care in little details. Something I noticed this time around was, with rare exception, unless you really fiddled with the camera to try to catch it happening, like Cloud's sword doesn't clip through stuff. Like when he sits on a bench, like he intentionally like kind of pulls it up to make sure that when he sits down, he could sit there. When he lays down on a bed to go to sleep, he sets it down next to him. And like there are just little things like that made this game feel like a step above in ways that you don't really even notice unless you're looking for them. But it's like, that sword is stupid big.
Right.
And they intentionally went through and made sure that, okay, when he's walking through this, like,
he takes
tight
the sword
corridor,
into account. Like he takes,
they're focusing on things like that I thought were really cool and probably go further than making sure that some of these like side quest NPCs look realistic.
No, I said, because there was a big hubbub when Spider-Man 2, the game, first came out, where people are like, hey, if you like crawl up slowly these skyscrapers, you can spot like they repeat room animations. Like you can look in the window and see. Yeah, but
they put rooms in there. Like, why are you complaining?
No, that was my whole thing, where it was just sort of like, there's a point where like it is a video game.
Right.
Calm down a little bit.
Yes.
Like
get off Twitter and go to bed.
No. What was it? It was either this one was a couple years ago. It was either God of War or Breath of the Wild, where they're like, yeah, but there's no grass physics. Like the grass isn't, like the bush doesn't get hit when you hit it with the thing. And you're like,
when I'm swapping between Kratos' axe and the Blades of Chaos, I don't care about the grass.
Yeah, no, this is the thing where it's just sort of like, there comes a point where like the game has to come out. People have to look at a thing and be like, is this good enough? And go, Yeah, because we've already been working on this for 5 years. It costs $600 million. We need to like put it out there so people can play it to make all of this worth it. Just roll with it.
It's one thing when you're picking apart like Pokemon games because you feel like you've gotten the same product for like 12 years in a row but
they've set up a system where that's like, well, we always have to make a new one every year. And it's like, is that enough time for you guys to make a new one? It's like, no, but we're making a new one every year because we have to.
Yeah, but it's another thing entirely when you're just, and a lot of it stems from just like the whole console war nonsense of like,
look at how many things this can render. And it's like, there's a point where I don't care. Like,
yeah, I mean,
is the game fun? Yes. Cool.
Exactly. And speaking of fun, kind of the last things, I mean, the main thing I want to hit in spoiler free before we can just cut it loose, and there may be a few other tertiary things we touch on, but the combat in this game
is phenomenal.
It's the heart. Like it is the core of why this game. And like I said earlier, my first time playing through, I felt like I got it and I got through the game. But this time, like, I made Cloud use the bat so that I could unlock the like special move that the bat has because it lets you switch stances when you use the move. And like, those are things I never even thought about or considered the first time through. And then just the first time through again, I was like, well, let me make sure I have every element materia on people. I'll try to like maybe make Tifa be a bit more brawly, maybe make Aerith be a little more magic-y. But this time I'm like very intentional about who has what they're going to be using, when they use it. And then I've like the whole pairing of materias, like where you can have them two in like a connected slot. Never even thought about that the first time through. And this time it's like, oh,
that's essential.
Every time Tifa punches something now, she's doing lightning damage. And that, those kind of things. The first time I played this game, and maybe minor spoilers, but I feel like this is a huge moment that everybody knows. The house that you fight was brutal for me. I had to replay it like 4 or 5 times. This time, first try. Because I understood the combat and the materia and the leveling of the weapons, and I was much more intentional with who is doing what and why they're doing it. Even at that point in the game, it's just 2 characters in the party, but they each had their roles. And like Cloud being able to switch to his like alternate attack mode, I don't think I really ever understood why that was important.
That's like a huge
in the first and so like just knowing, because I think a lot of it comes down to I understand games more now, obviously, than I did then. I've played more games, but B, just trying to like record and be in that mindset. I was like, well, I'm not going to sit here and read dialogue and experiment with things because I'm trying to make an episode of something.
We talked about this before we really got into it, but
there'll be some game sessions now where like 50% of my playtime is just goofing off in the menus and figuring out like how I want to synergize things.
No, we talked about before we really got into the conversation about like, 16 is more of a straightforward action game. They wanted to make an action game, and 16 is like, this is our Devil May Cry, but Final Fantasy, basically. Down to the fact they hired the action designer from Devil May Cry to do the action. 7 is an action. It is an action RPG, but it's got one foot in both worlds. It is an action game, but it is an RPG. So you do have to spend a lot of time scrolling in menus. There is a late game fight like that I had. It was just 2 of the party members, and I just kept getting killed by these 2. There were new enemies they had just introduced. So I have a little bit of an excuse for not knowing these are, but they're not supposed to be tough. They start throwing them at you in like droves, right after this, and I just kept getting my butt handed to me. I died like 14 times. I could not figure it out. Like I would get each time I get like a little bit farther, but I could not get over that hump of even like killing one of them and then focusing on the other. I just get smashed. And so finally I sat there. I used the materia that lets you kind of like scan and get their information. I got their information. I sat there. I read through their information and I sat and I'm like, okay, well, let's try this. And so I looked at like what their weakness was and I made sure I had that materia. I used it. Still died, but I was like, okay, I seem to do a little bit better. And I sat there and I fiddled with my materia. I spent like 20 minutes fiddling with my materia. Walked in. It was 30 seconds. I killed them in 30 seconds. And I was just like, I both hate and love video games so much right now.
There are definitely fights where I can tell I'm not optimized.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, I'm just kind of brute forcing this, and that's what the items are for. It's like, okay, this is where I spend my high potions or whatever.
Yeah, right. No, it's just sort
But
of like,
then-
well, I'm going to hit this thing really hard until it dies.
But then there are some fights where, like you said, you just bully the enemies, you just abuse them. And I'm curious because I'm getting to the point now in the game where I started to struggle a lot. And I'm curious on my replay how it's going to go now, having like a firmer grasp on the combat. And also, like, Barrett gets melee weapons.
Yes, there is.
I never touched those
Yeah.
the first time around. And like now he's just going in and just dropping this massive AoE like smash into the middle of it.
That
I'm
is,
like,
yes, no, see, we talked about this when we did it on Level Playing Field. This is one of my favorite combat systems in a video game. It's so much fun. Like,
and why is that? Because we haven't actually mentioned it for anyone that might not know, but like what makes this combat system unique?
So if you've not played it, for a second, I just described, an RPG. Oh, you got to spend all that time fiddling in menus. For the most part, this is a very compelling, it's a very compelling strategic action game. You spend a lot of time, in menus or whatnot, but it is really, you have your party, like your RPG party. You have usually Cloud's there. I want to say like 90% of the game.
Yeah, and when he's not, it really suffers.
Yes, no, because Cloud is the only one you mandatorily have to have with you. Again, 90% of the game. So Cloud's going to have a lot of stats that everyone else doesn't get, because even when you try to do it, anytime I play an RPG, I try to keep all my other party members at about the same level for it, as long as I can. Eventually I develop favorites, and towards the end game, you're like, I got to beef these guys up because they're who's going to be fighting the final boss with me. But if you're trying to keep everyone else about the same level, it's like, all right, well, I've had this person with long enough, that person long enough, I'll try this person. But for about half the game, you don't actually get to pick your party members. You kind of just
longer than that. I mean,
it's like 3/4, isn't it? It's pretty much basically the last like two dungeons
till the end, where you can potentially, because like where I am now, we're rescuing Aerith, and so it's like she's not in the party currently, so there's only 3 of us.
Yeah, so you don't get a lot of choice for most of the game until you bring it. So like they'll be decently.
Which I'm curious to see how that plays in the sequel, and we'll get to
they've
that
already
in spoiler stuff, but like having more party members.
Yeah, I have a feeling my normal I'm gonna really have a lot of fun playing with that, and also stressfully juggling. It's like, hang on, I haven't had Yuffie in my party for long enough. I need to make sure. But yeah, so you have your party, and you control all of them. When you're in the world map in this game, they've said specifically that's going to be different in the sequels. But in this game,
really interesting.
Yeah, in this game, you're always Cloud in the map. Anytime you're not in combat, you're Cloud. Once combat starts, you can control any of your 3 party members, and it's the shoulder buttons. You just swap between the 2, like the 3 characters. You jump from character to character. It's a very satisfying little effect when you swap, because it's like it does like a Matrix style freeze frame, and the camera swoops over behind them, and like the action recommences. And you want to do this. The game incentivizes you for doing this, because the characters are fine on their own. Like if you're controlling a character, the other 2 are going to. I have had more than a few times where I'm like, time to deliver the finishing blow, and it's like my partner just like took them out, and I was like, well, that was a little anticlimactic.
Right.
But they're not going to do great, and every character has a mechanic that it's like only works. Like Barrett has his overstrike, where it's just sort of like you can charge up his gun and then deliver like a powerful blow. Tifa can like power up and then deliver like a super combo. Cloud can switch from the 2 different like attack modes of like a more kind of balanced strike to like a more heavy-handed one that deals more stagger damage. And all of those are only going to happen when you're in control of them. So you kind of, as resource management, you want to like, okay, I'm going to use up Barrett's overstrike, and then I'm going to jump over to Cloud and pressure this guy. And then once he's been staggered, like pressured into being staggered, I am going to switch to Tifa, and I've been building up her combo each time I've switched to her. And so now she's got like a 300 something damage, like triple kick she can do. And so I'm going to switch over to Tifa, deal all that damage, go back to Barrett. At this point, he should have almost enough recharge that I can do a little bit more, recharge his gun, and deliver another blow while they're still staggered. So you're juggling constantly, and it's really fun. Like it feels good. Like the actual action combat has a nice crunch to it. Juggling the different characters always feels satisfying. It always feels like you have options. Like there's only a couple points in the game where you'll have like just a wonky fight where it's like, oh, those guys are kind of out of reach and I don't have Barrett with a gun to
Exactly.
shoot them. But for the most part, there's never a point in any of the fights where you're just sort of twiddling your thumbs waiting for something to happen. You can always just be pressing the basic attack button if nothing else. But you've also always got the option of juggling different characters. The materia you equip means everyone's got different spell slots. So it's like, well, this guy needs lightning damage. Let me switch to Aerith because she had my lightning materia. And it's just, it's so satisfying because it's just intrinsically fun to play. It's just very much like an old arcade beat 'em up. It's fun to hit things, yada, yada. But you always have such a bevy of choices that you always feel like you can do something in the moment. Even if you are in a situation where it's like, if you'd equipped the right materia or if you'd done the right stat juggling at this point, this would be such an easier fight. But even if you screw yourself on that end, most of the time it's like, okay, now that you're in the fight, you can still do something.
Yeah, what it is like boiled down to a back of the box quote is just like an active turn-based combat.
Yeah.
But they did it so well because you're rewarded by doing just the hack and slash mash square to swing Cloud's sword by filling up your ATB gauge, which is what you have 2 of those per character, like 2 chunks, unless you like modify it with like materia and stuff. But that is your resource to be able to to use items, to cast spells, or to use your special attacks. And so that's where the management comes in of like, okay, I've been swinging and like building up Clouds really fast, but I could really use this ability that Tifa has. Let me switch to her so I can build hers up, because you build it up a lot faster when you're controlling the character. Right. And so, yeah, it's just, if the combat system clicks with you and you like really just kind of sink into it and get nerdy about it, you can overlook anything else you don't like about this game pretty much, because it is so masterfully done. It like the active action nature of it satisfies the like Dark Souls player in me, but then the like turn-based resource management swapping, because you can command characters from just Cloud, like you can tell them to use their specials.
Like, Tifa, go do that,
and so that like satisfies the more like turn-based strategy kind of like part of my brain. And so there are moments in this game where you kind of just wish you could run past some of the combat because this stupid sewer section has gone on a little too long.
Yeah.
But for the most part, anytime I'm in combat, it's either a challenge that I'm enjoying overcoming, or it's just so fun to see my work pay off and just abuse these pathetic creatures that thought that they had a chance.
Yes, no, there's it's so much fun. The thing about the combat, it's so good, and the designers knew it. There is so much extra, like the best side content in the game is just like, here's extra combat challenges. You can go to an arena at one point and just like screw around and like do these challenges to earn some extra money. There's also the best side quest in the game is the summon materia side quest, which is how you get the big summons, which are always kind of like a really hype moment whenever you get like a summon fight, because they had fun. They had a lot of fun with just like, because I guess to an old fashioned player, it's a little frustrating because in the older Final Fantasy games, their summons were like, you can use that once per match, like just whenever you want to. If you're just like, I want this guy to be dead, as long as someone has a summon materia equipped, they can go in. It'll cost an obscene amount of your magic points, but like you can go in, do the summon. It'll do this cool animation. It'll take like 3,000 of the HP, whatever. Which is, like I said earlier, very fun when you've realized 4/5 of the way through the game you've kind of screwed up a little bit, and so you're just like, well, I have to use the summon here because I have to count into the fight, because I'm not going to win the fight unless I can do at certain points 4,000 damage, which I cannot do without the summon. So I have to make sure I have the right summons and everything lined up. And if I happen to run across this enemy and it's like, oh yeah, they're immune to fire damage, I'm like, so the fire summon I have is useless. And it's like, yeah, okay, cool. But in this game, it's just like only certain fights do they're like, here, you can use a summon. And it basically lets you know, it's like, hey, survive the next 30 seconds, basically. And you can use whatever summon you have equipped, because you have to have the summon materia equipped for a particular summon on a particular character. It's always so cool. To earn most of the summon materia, there are a couple you kind of just find. To earn most of them, you have to beat them in like a computerized fight. And so it's just like, of course, you're telling me I have entire optional bosses that I can then fight, and if I beat, it's just like, okay, cool. Now, in certain fights, you can make those bosses fight on your side. And then you, again, because you mentioned before, you get commands for your other characters. You can command them to do certain things, and it eats up a good chunk of their, like, they have a little meter, and it's like when the meter runs out, they're gone.
Right.
But it's like you can use up a chunk of that meter to do this specifically devastating attack onto this guy. So it just adds more layers of strategy. It's so much fun, and it is actually, because I've had a couple of people ask me, like, well, what do you prefer, the original Final Fantasy VII or Remake? And it's like, there's a lot of respects where I have to give it to the original, just because, like, we'll talk about it more in the spoiler section, but 7, I think they did as good of a job as they could, give or take, with, like, expanding what is essentially the opening fifth of the game into the first third of a trilogy. But it is a little bloated, and it's like, the original 7 is one of the best paced RPGs I've ever played. A new interesting thing happens, like, every 2 hours. So it's like, yeah, you kind of have to give it credit. It is a whole complete story. Like, you play through the end of the original 7, and you're like, wow, that was really good. You play to the end of Remake, you're like, wow, I hope the rest of these are as good as this one.
Yeah, exactly.
But the one thing I'm like, I will probably revisit Remake more often than 7. They're both huge games, but it's just like, you know what's really fun is the combat. Like, it's just so much fun. The other thing, and I do have to talk about, because this is a good substantial thing, you talked about the materia. My one complaint, my one thing, most of my complaints with the original 7 are on me. Like I said, I didn't play the game right. I kind of sped through it too fast. I'm like, if I play it again, I'm probably going to take my time, screw around a little bit more. The one thing where I'm like, no, that's just kind of a frustrating game design choice, is how they handle materia. It's every bit as deep and as interesting as it is in 7 Remake, if not more so, because 7 Remake holds back a bunch of, like, the later game materia, because it's like, we're going to use those in the sequels. However, materia management in the original is incredibly infuriating, because you do not, they're equipped to your party members.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the inventory, like the general inventory. What that means is if you take someone out of your party and swap them out for someone else, the materia goes with them. But then when you go to your inventory, their materia did not go back in the inventory. So it means you have to, every time you want to swap out a party member, you have to individually unequip every piece of materia. So then you can trade out for your whoever you're adding into your party. And then you have to go look at their inventory and what materia can slot in where. And it just becomes this really frustrating thing of, like, towards the back like chunk of the game, I just stopped swapping out party members as often as I usually did, just because I'm like, I don't want to spend 20 minutes in a menu that isn't for fun. It isn't like a thing where I'm, like, weighing and making choices. It's just like, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to unequip all of their materia individually. There's not like just a button where you're like, dump all the materia in the inventory. It's like individually unequip, 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 unequip. And then I go move them, swap out them for this party member, swap them out for this party member. And now I go in and, okay, equip. Shoot, they don't have enough spaces for this thing. So I guess I'll try this materia I need to level up anyway. I think the expectation they kind of have is that if you spend more time, you have a bunch of doubles of things. So it's like, oh, well, if you have 5 fire materia, it doesn't really matter that you forgot to unequip the one Aerith has.
Right.
And when you swap her out for, like, Yuffie. But if you only have 2, then it's just sort of like, well, I need someone who deals fire damage. It's like, oh, I got Barrett, but it's like, okay, well, later you swap out Barrett for Sid. And it's like, okay, cool. And you're like, wait, where's my fire materia? And then you're cycling through. It's like, oh, it's on Barrett. Well, now I have to put Barrett back in my party, take the fire materia. Incredibly infuriating. So I will give the remake an edge on that, because the materia management is much easier. You just look at an inventory of all of your materia. Could they make the organization of materia a little bit better? Yes. But they just let you look at all of the materia and be like, oh, I need that fire materia. And then it stops you, like, hey, this is currently equipped to this character. Is that okay? And so if you're like, oh, no, they need to have it, that's fine. But if you're like, they're not, Tifa's not here. Yes, I need it more than Tifa does.
Right.
Then you just hit yes, and then it moves it, doesn't say a thing. It's much better. But the materia, I can see why when you're playing through it for spectators, where it's like, I don't want to spend 30 minutes poking around in this menu with little glass balls. But the materia system is genuinely one of my favorite magic systems in any RPG. It's really simple to understand, but also very deep. And you can, like I said, that one fight, just these two guys beating the crap out of me for like 30 minutes, and then I spend 10 and a menu and I kill them in 10 seconds. You can do a lot with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I barely scratched the surface of it myself.
Yeah. I'm curious going in, because finishing these kind of end game fights, but then also maybe, like, I may replay the DLC the Yuffie DLC, and with my like new understanding of the game, and see how, because I don't remember really struggling with that too much except for maybe the final boss, but I'm curious how it goes with my new understanding and appreciation for the combat and materia system. I think we've covered a lot of what I wanted to touch on in the spoiler-free section. Obviously, music is great. They did a great job of updating and modernizing it. Barrett yelling the like victory.
That was a great
chime,
bit.
like
That
every.
was so good. I do have to say, this is genuinely one of my favorite video game scores. Like, I think the original Final Fantasy VII music is good. This is just like, okay, how do you take this beloved, good score and like update it for a modern audience? And it's like, well, you do a big orchestrated version of it, and that can still go, like, it can feel a little flat, or it can be. This is perfect. Like,
Yeah,
it is just,
they nailed it.
Just like I said, the way that they escalate the basic battle theme throughout the game is great. A lot of the pieces of music are really haunting and cool. I especially like, this isn't a spoiler because it's maybe one of the single most famous video game songs of all time. Don't hear through the entire game a full rendition, even at the end, a full rendition of One Winged Angel. It's always kind of pieces, and the kind of version they use of it at the end is not like, you can tell they're still holding back. They're like, no, when we get there,
Right.
we'll pull out all the stops. Right now, it's just like, it's a taste.
Yeah. Well, speaking of pulling out all the stops, are you ready to move into spoiler territory?
Absolutely. The only thing is, I gotta say, for people who haven't, I really like the Fort Condor minigame in the DLC. I hope that comes back. It's clearly their version, and that's why I'm worried it might not come back in the sequel, because they have a new card game thing. It's clearly them trying to be like, here's a Gwent adjacent thing,
Right.
and I'm like, yeah, but I kind of like the little strategy game element to it. It's like, I enjoyed that.
I had forgotten about that. Yeah, I'm curious to go back to that too. But yeah, good point. So now we are going to listen to some of that incredible music from Final Fantasy VII Remake, and when we come back, we will be in full spoilers. All right, Caleb. We are now full spoilers. Gloves are off. We can talk about whatever we want. What should we spoil first?
I don't know. There's so many. I will say, it's funny because this game doesn't have. However, the game it is based on has the single most famous video game spoiler of all time. And my favorite bit is still, I knew very little about Final Fantasy. My brother played Final Fantasy VII for me. He did not know it. I knew, like, he did not. He got to that scene, and I said, "Oh, it's that scene." And he said, "What do you mean?" And then it happened, and he was so distraught. He was so upset, and I was like, "I'm gonna go in the other room now." This is the Darth Vader is Luke's father of video games. I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm like, I don't know how you didn't.
Right? How did you miss that?
Yeah. It was literally the first thing I ever heard about Final Fantasy VII was that scene. And then I was like, oh, and then I heard afterwards, it's like, Final Fantasy VII, one of the greatest games of all time. And like, I slowly started building up that reputation to me, like it already had it, but like that, I picked up on that afterwards. The first thing I ever heard was that scene. But yeah, no, to circle back to what we were hinting at earlier, Remake is basically a sequel to the original Final Fantasy VII. So that's the big spoiler. That's the Band-Aid ripped off. If you've still listened past the spoiler thing, it's like, well, maybe this is the big plot twist at the end of Remake, is that it's essentially actually kind of a decaying time loop, that it's like,
yeah, and like they hint at it all throughout the game with the like shadowy ghost figures, and they pop
that was
up.
The first sign, because they had a couple of those in the trailer, and that was the first sign hardcore fans are like, that's not,
yeah, what is that? Yeah,
that's not from the game.
And so they pop up at like key moments or to affect key things.
Basically to make sure anytime the game starts to go like even a little bit like off script of the original, they basically show up and like, no, this happens. To the point where later in the game, as things start to get slightly more off the rails, a character who dies in the original survives the part where he's supposed to die and they literally throw him out a window. So he still ends up dead, but it's just like a thing where it's like anytime someone starts going down the wrong alley or starts like affecting I'm thinking of Spider-Verse now, the canon events,
right?
These weird things show up and start like screwing around so that the intended sequence of events happens.
Which, like, that is what it is, like canon events. And as somebody who's never played the original, you're kind of just like, oh, this is an interesting, weird thing that's happening in this interesting, weird video game. But like, I'm sure was different for people who had like memorized the original.
Oh no,
game.
it was interesting because even Alex didn't have it memorized, but he'd played through it twice because he played through it on his own and then he played through it with my sister Emily to kind of help her through the game. And then he saw the first couple times it happened and he was like, this did not happen. Like it's very obvious where it's just a thing because they kind of give you a moment of like, is this just a weird, we get a little bit of it. The guys in the robes who show up.
Yeah.
They're from the original game. And so it's like, at first you're like, well, is this just like a weirder rendition of some of that stuff? Like, is that like, are we basically tipping our hand a little earlier at some of the weird stuff that happens in the back half of the game? Or what is this? But like, the more it happens, you're like, this is straight up, I don't know what this is.
So tell me about this. Cause obviously there's a moment that I just recently played where they find the lab underneath Sector 7 and Cloud kind of sees everybody, like sees the experiments in the giant tanks, and then all of a sudden the ghost people show up and they just like wake up on the surface again. And they're like, oh, well, we better go do the thing. You know, we can't go back down there. And Cloud's kind of like, which leads me to the fact that Cloud has been having hallucinations and visions and seeing Sephiroth since like the very beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Is that something he's dealing with in the base game?
Yes, there is. I don't know how much of it you want me to tell you.
You can tell me anything.
Okay. Basically, I'm not going to give the whole thing away because I think they're going to cover some of it in
Right,
Reborn. But basically, a short
Rebirth.
Short version of this is, yes, most of it is Cloud has been going through some very specific trauma involving experimentation and involving just kind of what happened to Cloud right before the start of the game, where Cloud has some serious both psychological issues, but also genuine memory issues where he's like, what he has in his head is not necessarily what has happened. And so some of that is literally him like getting right up to the edge of like something cracking through and going, wait a minute, that in that specific case, they're like, you don't need to think about this. You don't need to remember this any earlier than you're supposed to. Like,
okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, because like at the end of this game, and it's something my ideal scenario is to finish this game and then maybe watch some videos again to kind of refresh myself on the like screwery that they're doing with this timeline. But to the best of my memory, like you end up Cloud and Sephiroth clash at the very end, but we're not sure that it's like Sephiroth from Cloud's timeline.
So this is the part, my brother has this, we have this great running conversation because my brother loves the Final Fantasy games as much as I do. He is also the only one of us who has played through all the Kingdom Hearts games, which is from...
I swear to God.
No, it's not that.
Okay.
But it's really
like
funny.
If Mickey Mouse shows up in the next game.
It's not going to be that. I do think there will be some I won't be surprised if there are some very specific funny shenanigans.
I did very much notice Cloud's pants a lot more in this game with like how they kind of like poof out at the bottom then tuck into the boots. And I'm like, I'm seeing the Nomura in all of this.
Oh yeah, well that's what I was going to say. For those who don't know, Nomura, who is one of the main guys over at Square Enix, he got his start being the art director for the original Final Fantasy VII. So this was always his baby. He wasn't the original director of Final Fantasy VII. He was just the guy who was in charge of the character designs. However, one of his more famous series that he did.
So we can thank him for Tifa.
Yeah. We can thank him for a lot of things. But he also was in charge of. He wasn't just in charge of the art design, though he did that too. The Kingdom Hearts games, which now makes sense. Where you're like, oh, that's why Cloud and Sephiroth just show up in Kingdom Hearts.
Well, they used to be a cross between Final Fantasy and Disney before it just became its own like
it's its own insane
Disney thing.
But Alex has this recurring joke where we talk about all these various things, and he brings up Kingdom Hearts and whatnot. And his whole thing is Kingdom Hearts is not as complicated as people make it out to be. It's just weird. Like they just do weird things. They have weird cliffhangers that they then decide like
And it's just spread across like a very awkward amount of titles and systems.
Right. So it's like if you actually like sit down and go through the story, it's actually pretty straightforward and not like it's not
just
complicated. It's just weird.
Yeah.
He said all that to say, I have no idea what happened at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's genuinely a thing where I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like even usually in Kingdom Hearts, he's like, they'll say something weird and you're like, okay, but it's a pretty obvious metaphor. Like it's a pretty obvious, like, yeah, okay, this means that and that means this and whatever. It's like, it's ridiculous. Like, because at one point I just said something. I'm like, is that right? He's like, that's completely correct. Because what was it? I'm like, oh, that guy exists because Zora got turned into a nobody. And so then that created a heart, or he got turned into a heartless. So that means that guy existed because he's a nobody. And nobodies are created when you become heartlesses. And because that guy was hiding inside Sora's heart, that means he looks like him, right? And he's like, yes, correct. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, but you understood it. I'm like, yeah, but it's weird. He's like, yeah, that's what it is. And I'm like, so what happened at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake? I have no idea. I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we get, like, they close the loop on a lot of this as the next games come out and that it doesn't just stay, like, weird and nebulous. Like, I want this to be intentional. I don't want it to be weird for weird's sake.
I don't think it is, purely because we already know there's going to be, we're in the spoiler section. Zack is on the cover of the next one. There is going to be more stuff with Zack.
Did you play Crisis Core?
I am actually literally, I mentioned in the non-spoiler half that I almost played Remake, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. The thing I chose to play instead was Crisis Core. So I have just started Crisis Core.
I didn't feel like playing it initially, but now that I'm like replaying Remake, I'm kind of like, you know what? Maybe I'll play Crisis Core.
I'm enjoying it. What I played, so I barely started because some stuff came up in like my
right.
work where it was just sort of like, oh, not even just my main job that's gotten busier, but like I have a side job where I watch people's houses, and it went from like a thing where it's like, can you watch our house this weekend? Into, can you watch, we had a family emergency. Can you watch our house for 3 weeks? And it's like, absolutely yes, but I didn't get enough time to pack the PlayStation, so my brother's bringing it over tonight. We're going to hang out and whatnot. But
nice.
I was like, I'd ask him like, are you playing anything right now? And he's like, no, on the PS5. I'm like, no. Can you bring the PS5 over when you come tonight and my copy of Crisis Core so I can get back into it? Because I was having a good time. I also I like Zack. I like Cloud more, which is funny. The Nomura and the director, because Nomura was the co-director on Final Fantasy VII Remake. He is not going to be the director. He's just like one of the producers on Reborn. But his co-director from Remake is the full director of the ones going forward. They were talking in an interview promoting the new game, and they're like, so who do you like better, Zack or Cloud? And they're like, we love Zack. Zack's great. It's Cloud. And they're like, part of the reason we love Cloud is because Cloud's a pathetic loser and he makes you feel bad for him like a sad puppy. And so you want to help him. I'm like, that's accurate, actually. That works. That's Cloud's one of my favorite characters in a video game. But it has been funny playing Crisis Core because you get so used to Cloud's kind of internal angsty like anxieties, and he's got imposter syndrome, very literally. He's got like a whole mess of issues, and he's not sure what the right thing to do is, and he's trying to create a kind of false self around himself that seems cooler than he is because he's so insecure. Zack is like Sonic the Hedgehog. Zack's like, all right, let's do this. Let's go kick some butt, which is very funny. But no, I've started Crisis Core. I want to, before Reborn comes out, play through Crisis Core and watch Advent Children, because I feel like those two are probably going to play more into the games going forward. And I have a copy of Advent Children. I just haven't sat down and watch it. Those feel like they're going to play more into what they're doing with Zack and with Sephiroth and with all that stuff than the only other game in the Final Fantasy VII series, which I still want to play. But Dirge of Cerberus, I don't think that's going to matter to anyone.
No, the fact that they like remastered Crisis Core and put it out between
that feels like an intentional like.
Yeah, I'm like, They throw Zack at the end of like as like the post credits or whatever.
That was the funniest thing to play, because again, I had not played the original Final Fantasy VII. I understood, like by the end, it's very clear in the text. It's like, oh, this is a sequel. They're changing the text. Things don't have to go the same way. I still didn't know what they were changing because I hadn't played the original. When it's like Zack is that post credits bit where Zack is like, wait, they're all dead. All right, we're good. My brother was in the room watching. He lost it. He's like, what? That's not, I'm like, I don't understand. What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So there was a moment in the remake that I didn't really clock before, obviously not knowing anything, but now having like being on a replay when Aerith and Cloud are sitting on top in the park, and she says something about, her boyfriend was a soldier or whatever. And then when she says his name, Cloud is like, doesn't hear it.
Yep.
There's just moments like that. I love how weird it is. And I really appreciate how much they're toying. Like, they saw that they had one of the most like well-known video games of all time, one of the most like foundational video games for a lot of people that are like now in adulthood and looking forward to playing this one. And they're doing such a good job of toying with that.
Oh yeah. Well, again, we're the most famous spoiler in video games as we approach the sequel. And I swear to those listening, we are going to talk more about Remake, but the sequel is at this point coming out in 3 weeks. So it's on my mind. One of the most impressive things in the world, the most famous spoiler in video games, the sequel is going to cover it. They've said what parts of the game it covers. And it's like, it happened. We're all sitting here going, okay, but are they going to do it? Like, is that going to be one of the things that changes? That's hilarious. It's like if they made like a redo of Star Wars and you'd be sitting there going, okay, but is that Anakin Skywalker? Is that Luke's father? Do we know? Are we sure? And because it's funny because me and my brother I'm 50-50, but leaning one way. My brother's like 60-40 leaning the other way. And so we're both on opposite sides of this where he's like, no, I think it's going to happen. I'm like, I kind of don't know that it is because I
could see it happening to somebody else.
That's my thing.
Like, mix up who dies.
There is an element where I'm like, there's a wrong answer. There's an answer to this question that I'm like, I don't like that very much. But I do think there is a point where you're going, well, if we remake the game and we do it the way we're doing it, which is where things can change, it's like, this is kind of the obvious thing where it's like, change this and then all bets are off. Like that's the one thing you do. The issue with that is that the third game in the trilogy still has to happen. And the spoiler is famous for a reason. The rest of the game is about that. The rest of the game is about that loss, is about that kind of like...
Yeah, it's something that I think we can get into a little bit more, maybe wrapping this conversation up, but I'm curious, how far are they going to deviate? Like, are they going to try to keep this Final Fantasy VII Remake, like it is a remake of the original game, or was Remake intended to be like, guess what? It's not the same thing, and now 2 and 3
get to be.
They're not called Remake 2 and 3. It's called Rebirth, and then which they put in quotes in all the subtitles in the first game, which I caught the second playthrough. Was like, it's interesting that every time a character says Rebirth, which is a weird word to use just in general.
Yeah,
but they put it in quotes every time.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm curious. Will it be just is it going to be a Spider-Verse thing where it's like, no, we're doing the whole timelines, we're rewriting history, like all that kind of stuff? Or will it be like, no, this is still the same story, but we're just remixing it a little bit?
Yes, no, that's what I joked to my brother, and then we can move on to other stuff about Remake, but I joked to my brother, I'm like, what if like Rebirth changed it so much that like it's the third one is not even just like, it's not Final Fantasy VII, whatever, because Crisis Core actually used the Crisis Core remaster they did used the obvious the obvious subtitle that you would use for the third game, Reunion. In the original game, that word is very important, and it's very important to the last chunk of the game is the word Reunion. So it's like, oh, well, once they announce it's Rebirth, it's like the third one's got to be called Reunion, right? And it's like, well, no, that's what the Crisis Core remaster is called. I joked to Alex, I'm like, that's because at that point we get to, it's going to be so different that it's like, it's actually just Final Fantasy 17. Like, it's just its own thing.
They put Reunion in quotes, too, in the subtitles.
Yeah, it's because Reunion is, like I said, an incredibly important term in the back half of that game.
Yeah, I'm curious. It would not shock me at all if this game sets up the fact that, like, speaking about Rebirth, sets up the fact that this is...
all bets are off.
This is it's a Spider-Verse situation versus, like, a slight tweak on the original story. I feel like we're already, like, we've dove to the very bottom of the rabbit hole here, so like let's just talk about anything else you have to say about this game and like the ending and the remixing and all that, and then we can go back and kind of like cherry pick some just like like we got to talk about Cloud and a dress, obviously. Things we need to talk about in the spoiler section, but let's get all the big stuff out of the way and then we'll go back to those.
Yeah, there's some really fun stuff in the back half of this game. I will say the first time I played it, the front half is when I was like, I think this is maybe one of the greatest video games ever made. Yeah. And the back half is when I was like, okay, at the end, when this trilogy's done, this might be like as a whole one of the greatest video game projects ever made. But I'm like, this one itself has some growing pains.
There's some specific things I jotted down in my notes as I was playing through it, and one of them is that the mechanical arm puzzles still suck. They're
not great.
God awful.
That's just a problem I think with modern video games in general. Is they're like, well, you need what Tim Rogers calls game flavors. You need the okay, you can't just do action all the time. It'll get boring.
Right.
You can't do walking around all the time. You need like puzzles and stuff to do.
The specific problem with the arm puzzles is that they're bad.
Yes, that's it. That's entirely it. It's like, I see why you put these here. Do better next time.
They're so clunky and like unfriendly to the player. The fact that like just every little movement has to be like a process.
Yes. And it's the worst kind of puzzle.
Yes.
Which is the puzzle where it's not hard to figure out what you're supposed to do. It's just annoying to do it.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, there's a materia thing over there.
That's the work
that I know I can get, and I know how to get it, but it means that I'm going to double the time this is going to take because I now have to move this thing here, then back down, then back up, then back over. Then I have to essentially reset all the pieces to unlock the door to progress. So those were annoying. Another thing I forgot about that just really irked me this time around was the water pump mini game.
Oh, that thing sucked.
In the sewer, where for some reason, and maybe this was like an OG Final Fantasy nod or something, they're just like, hey, Cloud, you stay here, and us girls are going to walk out and handle this. So then you're playing as Aerith for no reason. For literally like 10 seconds, you walk out to the pump and you do this ridiculous mini game.
Yeah, the mini game's not in the original, and I hate it so much in Remake.
The stupid like time. So that was terrible. And then you walk back and Cloud's like, "You guys got it?" And they're like, "Yeah, we got it." And then you're Cloud again. It's like, what? what was this? Because the part of the game I just finished was chasing the stupid toad to get Leslie's like locket thing. And that I felt like wasn't as bad this time around.
Yeah.
Maybe because I was like building up in my mind as being like this terrible time sink. Right. But some of these other things that I had forgotten about, I was like, oh yeah, these were kind of lame. The other thing I jotted down that I wanted to mention in this, well, I guess kind of on that, like not playing as Cloud, when you're just Barrett in that like lab underneath Sector 7, and there's all the like crates you can open and stuff, and you have to like kind of shoot them, but you can't actually aim as Barrett. You just kind of have to hope and pray that you're pointing the right direction. That whole section was kind of dumb. And playing as just Barrett, it kind of sucks. He's a support character.
And it's the frustrating thing where like it feels like half measures. It feels like
yes,
they're trying to give you. They know they're not going to give you. I was talking about this with my brother. It feels like the game everyone said they wanted when they said we want a remake of Final Fantasy VII. I feel like Rebirth is actually that game.
Yes.
And Remake is just kind of the road they needed to take to get there. They're like, look, logistically, games don't work the same way they used to. You can't, when you're talking about full 3D stuff, you can't have the rug pull. The original Final Fantasy VII, the fact that Midgar is, in fact, the prologue is kind of like a, oh, snap moment where like the world opens up and you're like, oh, this game's huge. Oh my goodness, this game's huge. They're like, you can't really do that anymore. So we'll beef it up a little bit, turn it into kind of the first third of the game, essentially, and that'll justify how much money it will cost to make Midgar. And then we can move on to the other stuff. So I feel like Rebirth is actually the big open world Final Fantasy VII remake everyone wanted. However, because Midgar, they could only do so much with, they could only, you don't meet half the party until after Midgar. You can't, there's all this stuff you can't do. So I feel like occasionally they do these little half measures of like, well, look, you can play as Barrett a couple times, and like, okay, it's Red 13 is in so little of this. We're not going to make him a playable character. However, he'll do a couple little puzzles with you that it's just like it's a little thing, and it's just sort of like I understand logistically why this has to happen, but in certain cases, especially that stupid water pump, I'm like, you didn't have to bother. It's okay if this game like breezing through it is 35 hours instead of 45. Like, that's all right.
Yeah,
I still feel like I got my money's worth.
They started developing this game like years ago, right? So some of
they actually started developing it and then reset it. Like it was a a whole deal, because there was a long stretch where people were really worried that it's like, well, this game's gonna suck because like they basically scrapped what they had done so far and started over.
But I could see having some of the like old school design sensibilities still like eking their way in of like, well, this has to be a certain hour length, otherwise the players aren't going to feel like they got their money's worth, whatever. And I feel like if this game had, I mentioned it earlier, if it had leaned into the linearity and if they had cut out a lot of just the slow walking and the chasing the toad and like some of the things that just hold it back, it would have been a stronger, if not slightly shorter overall experience. But I think gamers now are fine. Like obviously Spider-Man 2, there's a difference between the discourse on Twitter and then what like the rest of the gaming community thinks. So you have to kind of keep that in perspective. But like me personally, this would be a game that I would appreciate revisiting more often if I knew there weren't those like pain points.
Yeah, I get that. I understand. It's funny, before I was rewatching the Tim Rogers Action Button review of Final Fantasy VII, he talked basically the same thing where he's like, I kind of wish this was just an action game. Like I kind of wish they had kind of given in to just they just made this the Final Fantasy VII, the arcade game of itself, where it's just like, okay, we cut out all that extra stuff.
Well, and
I think part of the appeal of a Square Enix game, like I think this is part of their, both to their benefit and to their detriment, is in their minds, anytime they do a Final Fantasy game, or even any of their big series, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest, whatever, in their mind, it's like, this is the video game of video games. Like this is video game, the video game. It's all in here. We packed as much as we could into it. And sometimes it's great, but it kind of reminds me of like my thoughts after I played Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, which is I would have loved so much of that. I would have loved that so much more if roughly half of that was optional, because making me do it, I'm like, I kind of hate this. And
I think that they just overachieved or overcorrected because blowing out all the stuff with Jesse's family and blowing out
that was great.
The motorcycle chase and basically like the early parts of the game that they expanded on. Fantastic. A lot of it's still pretty linear. My problem is when they like tack on the goofy side quests, or just like it really feels like in the back third of the game they were like, well, we have to extend the length a little bit, so how about we chase this toad around the sewer and you don't catch it 3 times and then you finally catch it and then okay, now you can move on. That feels so superficial
and it's
like
basically
pointless.
Just to reuse, like, well, we got to pad out the time a little bit. Okay, so do we make a new location? No, we send them through the sewers again that they've already been through, but now they do fight different guys and they follow this little thing, and it's just like,
so like I value the expansion of like characters and stuff that weren't as big in the original. That is fine, and I like that. It's more so when they're just like trying to pad out the gameplay for what feels like just an hour count that they can put on their like marketing material.
Now that you bring up some of the characters I have to bring up, I love Motorcycle Dude is not in the original, and he's so great. One of the last trailers they released for Rebirth, which I only half watched because I'm like, you're close enough. I was
going to ask you if you're going to play the demo because I think I'm not going to.
I'm not. Alex did.
I'm sold at this point.
No, that's my whole thing. Plus, there was a whole thing where it's like, well, if you play the demo, you can skip it when you get to the game. I'm like, I kind of just want to experience the game.
I played Final Fantasy 16's demo, but it felt like it was a lot closer to the release.
Yes.
And then skipping it was nice because it was long, but it was also still super fresh.
Right.
At this point, I'm like, I'll just play it all at once. Like,
no, and
I'm good.
I downloaded the 16 demo, played about 2 hours of it, and was like, no, I just want to buy the game. Yeah. I'm good. I'm not going to play any more.
Hell of a demo.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just going to. So I did, and it's like, yeah, I'll just play it that way. Like, I'm not going to play through the rest of the demo. And then I was like, I'll just buy the game because I thought stuff came up, but I'm like, I thought I was going to just straight up jump into the game, but that did not happen.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on 16 when you finally get to it.
I'm looking forward to it. I have 4 other games.
It's like
talking before then, but
it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is why video games were made.
Yes, that's kind of why I was like playing the first couple hours of the demo. I was like, oh,
it's like, do you like Game of Thrones, Dark Fantasy, and do you like Godzilla? Well, if you like those two things,
and I like,
do we have the game for you?
But no, but speaking of they dropped that trailer, and I saw Motorcycle Guy was back, and I cheered because I was like, oh heck yeah, I love him. He's so ridiculous. He's great.
Yeah, because he just kind of like disappears in the first game.
Yeah, well, just because,
and he kind of disappears in like a hey, I like you guy. Yeah. Like we may be on opposite sides, but
I do find it really funny how incredibly horny everyone is for Cloud. Like, because Cloud's just got this kind of sad, kind of tough, but it's so clearly a front energy. And it's just funny. It's like Jesse's got a huge thing for him, which is from the original game, but it's like 2 lines of dialogue. But they fleshed out. It's like, oh, Jesse's really hot for this guy. Actually, it's
Jesse was going to like abduct him before like things happened.
But it's like, oh, him and Tifa are like old childhood sweethearts, and so there's this tension there. And then Aerith clearly likes him like right after meeting him, and then it's like this motorcycle guy is like really fond of Cloud. Like it's like I'm reading it's fairly platonic, but it's like, oh, this guy's like aggressively like it's like, you and me are gonna battle till the end of time, bro. And
it's like the classic Saturday morning cartoon, like antagonist energy of like, I respect you, but we have to fight.
Yes, no, it's great, and I'm looking forward to more of him. But speaking of Jesse, I really did like, having played through the original now. Those characters are great, fleshed out, especially Wedge and Biggs and Jesse, to the point where I can tell it's kind of a rule of theirs that like, especially with the DLC, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, but no characters can be playable unless they were playable in the old Final Fantasy VII game. I'm very clearly to see if they'll grandfather Zack in from Crisis Core, because it's like he's playable in Crisis Core, but not in the original. But I can't, given he's on the cover of the box, and given how important they're hinting, I'm like, I can't imagine we don't get at least maybe more in the third game, but at least in the second game, like a couple sequences where you play as Zack. Just I don't see it not happening. But otherwise, it's like very clear that no characters who aren't playable in the original 7 are playable in this game, because it's actually a little bit weird that Jessie isn't playable. Like how much she's in the plot and how much like she's on the team for the first half of the game. It's like, it's a little weird she's not in the party.
Yeah, she's very key.
And then both fleshing out both Biggs and Wedge is really great. Like they're both, because again, those two are a Star Wars joke. Like it's those two.
Star Wars and Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, no, which isn't really present in the original game. Like I said, they don't matter. Like they have 4 lines of dialogue total. They're in like 2 scenes. It's like we got a skinny guy and a chubby guy over here, and then we have the girl, and it's just like those are the other soldiers, and then they die like 5 hours into the game, and then you move on. Like it's kind of a It's to give the appearance of a more fleshed out like little group of ragtag soldiers. And it's like, well, okay, well that 5 hours that they're in the original game where they have 3 lines of dialogue, and they're like, okay, that's 2/3 of our game. So we better like give them stuff to do. And they do a really good job of kind of fleshing these guys out into being someone who you find compelling. And it's even like, you already liked Jessie in the original game with her like 7 lines. I was like, oh, it's a cute girl as a thing for Cloud, and it's sad when she dies. And it's like fleshing it out. It's like, this is actually a giant bummer now.
Yeah, no, she was a really good character in the remake. It's time for a question based on a mechanic that I didn't even really realize was in the game the first time I played it. And it's the classic Yennefer or Triss, which in this game is Aerith or Tifa. In Remake, based on the side quests you do or don't do, you get a moment, a scene that can change where Cloud comforts Tifa in Aerith's garden, or like some sort of projection of Aerith comes back and talks to Cloud, or if you did nothing, apparently Barrett can be out there.
Yes. That's a joke from the original Final Fantasy VII, which they really are hyping up because it's the scene that's going to be in the second one, where you could take any of the 3 girls on that are in your party at that point on a date to the Gold Saucer, and it's like, or you've screwed it up with it so badly that it's just like Barrett's in there, and he's like, dude, you got problems.
So it also, like, you can affect the dresses that they wear based on what you tell Tifa, and then the side quests you do when you're Aerith's bodyguard. For me, I got Tifa both times. First time because I just had no idea, just was playing the game.
Right.
Second time because I made the choice of Tifa because I picked her. Because also when they're both like unconscious on the ground after escaping Cornero, whichever one you go to kind of affects that scene as well.
Yeah.
So which is best girl for you, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
It's Aerith. It's absolutely Aerith. I love Tifa too, and this is the fun thing, is it's kind of like all of the characters. There are a short list of video game characters I refuse to be normal about, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Leon Kennedy.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, no,
First thing out of your mouth.
I have It's very funny because
I can't wait to play Sonic Generations and Shadow.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to that. I'm going to be there in theaters for the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 movie. Do I expect it to be good? Not necessarily. Am I super excited? Yes.
I may go see that in theaters as well. I might, depending on reviews and stuff. I took Cadence to see the second one. I might take her to see this one too, depending on if Shadow is scary or not.
That's fair. But no, the entire cast of Final Fantasy VII is on that list of just like, I love these guys so much. I'm so excited for everyone to meet Vincent Valentine in the next one. He's maybe the dumbest character in a video game not in terms of him being stupid, like intelligence-wise.
I was going to say, have you met Johnny, voiced by Spider-Man?
No, I just mean like in terms of like, there's this guy, he dresses like he's a 90s anime Dracula. It's like, okay, so he's like a vampire? Well, he sleeps in a coffin, so he's a vampire. No, he's a werewolf. Okay, you want to guess what weapon he uses? Is it like a scythe? No. Like a sword? No. Spear? No. It is a Glock. It is just a normal gun.
So this is Devil May Cry is what you're talking about.
You know, like, yeah, and he's like, no. And I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. I love him so much, especially because he is the broody kind of thing Cloud pretends to be. It's always so funny watching him bounce off people. He still talks in like 16th century English. It's great. But no, I picked Aerith's great. I just love Aerith as a character. I chuckled to myself earlier because I remember the bit where it's like, protector of the planet, science experiment, local florist. But I also genuinely like Tifa. She seems like a person who's not just genuinely concerned for the people around her. She hired Cloud because, you know, he owed her a favor, but I think she's also looking out for his best interest and is like, hey man, you doing all right? Like,
yeah, it's funny because Tifa on the Aerith on the outside is very like sweet and kind of like teehee, but just also doesn't put up with any of Cloud's shit at all.
I've tried to explain to people what I like about the dynamic so much, and I'm like, it's because Cloud will like try to put up that front or try to BS something or whatnot, and Aerith will be like, okay, nerd. Like, she just roasts him mercilessly.
But I don't know if it's just the obvious aesthetics or if it's the kind of long time friendship history between like Cloud and Tifa that kind of push, because I love Aerith as well, especially on this second playthrough. I'm like, man, like she's great and their dynamic is great, but there's just something about the Tifa Cloud and also the Tifa me that just like pushes that one over the edge.
I get it entirely. No, that's very fair. And usually the childhood friendship to the thing is like a big selling point for me on any sort of romance buying into it. But for some reason, I'm just like, that girl's the coolest girl that's ever lived. So yeah, I gotta go with Aerith. But no, there's no real wrong answer to this. My favorite thing is that they have the whole Betty and Veronica dynamic of they're best friends themselves, and so you kind of sometimes get the feel like, oh yeah, they're both interested in Cloud. At the same time, he's kind of almost a third wheel on his own. They're like,
there's the
let's go do this. Let's have this. I did it. And Cloud's like,
There's the whole dynamic with them, like kind of that first time in the sewers trying to get to Sector 7, where they're kind of working together and having conversations and planning their future. And they're like, oh yeah, and we'll just bring Cloud he'll be our muscle, you know?
Yeah.
And it's that exact.
I don't know what I'm doing. Cloud is also underratedly hilarious. Like sometimes intentionally, where he'll just say something that's really funny, but also other times we should probably talk about Cloud in the dress, where it's just.
I was going to say it's a perfect transition to when he's like, "Yes, nailed it. I know."
Yeah, no, it's really funny because it's kind of a delicate moment where you can just go, "Oh, dude in dress," and you laugh at it and whatnot. Cloud doesn't. It's like this is part of an elaborate con. He's trying to make it work, and he's pulled it off like enough to make it work. And so there's this moment where you're like, "Oh, is Cloud like embarrassed?" And like clearly he is. But he's like, you know what? The best strategy to get out of this without having to answer too many questions is just like roll with it. Is just go with it. It's the hardest I laughed the entire game was to like, wait, Cloud, that dress. Yes, I know, nailed it. Moving on.
Yes, that part got me. I loved it, especially on this replay. That whole sequence. I mean, Final Fantasy VII, especially when comparing it to 16, something that we talked about in maybe our cold open, comparing like network drama to anime is basically because Final Fantasy VII is anime in all of the best ways and some of the more awkward, cringy, we're going to grunt when we're trying to convey emotion ways. Yeah. Cloud goes, like like all the time.
It's funny because we talked about this last week, just in person. We were hanging out, and you and Dylan were talking about how much it got on your nerves. And I genuinely, that's not a thing I notice in anime anymore. Like, I've just gotten so used to the fact, like, yeah, that happens. I just kind of tune it out. It doesn't even seem that weird to me. That said, you said something about it. I watched a clip of the ending, and I was like, it still doesn't bother me. Like, it doesn't annoy me, but I'm like, I do see what they mean. They do the whole like, because there was one bit in one of the cutscenes I watched where like Barrett said something, and it was Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith all like in a row, and each of them made like a and I was like, all right, okay, I get it. Like, it's not a deal breaker for me. It doesn't bother me. But I'm like, that is a thing that if you're not used to it, I can see you going, hey, bro, what the heck? No one does this.
It's a little distracting, and it's very anime.
Yes.
I notice it, and I think that it's mostly because it's just so much in this game. But it doesn't, like, it's not a deal breaker for me. It does kind of, like, I've seen some reactions and opinions around, like, the demo for Rebirth, and people saying that, like, they felt like the voice acting was better this time around. So I'm kind of hoping that in the sequel, they maybe, like, tone some of that down, and also playing 16 and none of that being present.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, like, I get it.
But you're like, I would prefer it not be here.
But on the flip side of that, like, some of the crazy nonsensical anime stuff that happens in 7 Remake is just fun and goofy. And like, on the one hand, you know,
the original game is also very goofy. Like, it's very
well,
serious,
it makes sense because it's from
goofy.
that era. Like, I could see, you know, there's the like workout bros in what is that city? What is that?
Walmart.
Walmart, yes. And it's like, that feels like straight out of like a Zelda game. Like, it feels goofy and nonsensical, but Zelda games are always stylized. And so they always have that kind of like, whereas this, they tried to go for like realism, and then you have these kind of goofy stylized games.
Yes, so no, it is a choice, because it is a very intentional choice where they went with, they could have done like a cell shaded remake. They could have done like different, like a more exaggerated art style. You look at something like the Yakuza Like a Dragon games,
right?
Where it's like, no, the graphics are quote unquote realistic, but the style is definitely more out there and crazy. They could have done something like that. They said, no, we want to make a realistic, grounded version of Final Fantasy VII as much as we can get away with. To the point where people have pointed out, every Final Fantasy protagonist used to have this spiky hair. Cloud just had the spikiest. But after that, as graphics started getting more realistic, they kind of shied away from it. Cloud has it grandfathered in to where he's got like realistic hair. But it's also like very clearly in the shape of his old anime hair. And it's like a thing where it's like I cannot tell you how many iterations of that they probably did until they found one that works.
Yeah, because it kind of looks like the Smash Bros. Character model, but not as a little bit refined from that even.
Yes, no. And the Smash Brothers model was still even like, I forgot until I went back and played Smash Brothers after playing Remake. I'm like, oh, this is like a little bit more cartoony. Like, this is like a little bit more like cheesy. They found just basically the perfect amount of realistic they could make that hair without it looking stupid. And they found just the amount of spiky they could make realistic hair look without it looking stupid. It's very impressive.
But it's also the fact that like Barrett is a giant when he like hugs Tifa and comforts her, when they like high five. It's like she has a toddler hand compared to his hand.
No, it's a very funny thing where like they went for realistic, which has its upsides and its downsides, because like, yeah, it looks really good. Like we said, it's one of the best looking video games there is right now. And at the same time, you get something like that where you're like, wait, Barrett's proportions don't make sense for a human being.
Exactly.
His thigh is as big as Cloud's torso.
Exactly.
Like, it's one of those things you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, you know, it makes sense when you look back at the old like 90s 2D illustrations. You're like, yeah, they're manga characters. That's how they're designed. And it's like, yeah, it's just, they're shapes. And then it's like, oh, now we made them into people, but we kind of want to keep the fact that everyone remembers them as these shapes. So they have to be kind of roughly the same shape. And you're like, yeah, until you're looking at it, and you're like, huh. But they do it so well that I watched the ending fight scene with Cloud and Sephiroth, like that little square off they have at the moon. I love that scene so much, even if I can't tell you remotely what it means. But it's such a cool fight. But I'm watching it, and the sword fight is so well done, so well choreographed, so cool. And it took me, like, I watched it again, and I'm like, physics-wise, neither of their swords make sense. I don't know how this is happening. like you watch it, and in the moment, you're like, this is so cool. But you're also sitting there going, wait, no, that doesn't work like that.
Yeah, Cloud. My headcanon is just that like every weapon Cloud uses is either he has. Well, it just has to be made out of some sort of like material that's lighter than it looks, because even if he was modified genetically to be able to wield it, it's still a heavy piece. Like just the proportions of it, he would be swinging it differently.
Yes, no, there's a lot of I was watching specifically because the combat's so great. I was watching specifically someone's playthrough, like just a no commentary playthrough, and I was watching some of the like fight scenes. I was like, I want to remember what the rhythm of this is like. I want to get, because I didn't have my PlayStation on me, as I said earlier. So I'm like, I want to just watch what the rhythms were like. And as I'm watching some of those animations Cloud's doing, I'm like, that's like how I used to swing around my plastic lightsabers that weighed like 4 ounces.
Yeah.
Just like he's just like whoosh, 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 whoosh. And it's impressive on like a detail level that they would make the animations convincing enough that like it doesn't feel like nothing's like teleporting anywhere. It still feels like it's got weight and heft and everything. But like at the same time, you're like, I feel like you swing that sword once and it's like a 20-second long endeavor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is to the credit of the like audio design and stuff, is making it believable. The one thing I mentioned in the spoiler-free section that I want to touch on here, and then I'm probably good, and we can just kind of start to wrap up the spoiler talk. But there's the sequence of them escaping the top of the plate after, like, as it explodes, and it's done in like the most Advent Children high fidelity style. Like this is a full-on movie level CG production. I was like, what is happening here? Like the cutscenes in the base game look great. Some of the like, we're talking to random NPC number 7 here, looks terrible. This looked like they spent, like this was supposed to be a movie, and they're like, well, we'll just stick it in this game because it fits here.
Yeah. No,
it's like, what is this?
It is incredibly, again, you go back to the thing I said earlier about the original Final Fantasy VII. I find charming the mixed media project where they're like clearly brushing up, like the technology isn't there to make what we actually want to make, so we're going to push at the edges of the technology in every direction. Like we're going to go as far as we can with every piece of it, which means there's like the entire reason Final Fantasy VII, the original one, is 3 discs long, is just the cutscenes. It's actually the length of the game, the size of the game, is not enough to justify needing 3 discs, but they're like, we got like a couple cutscenes in here that are basically bleeding edge technology.
Right.
So they take up a lot of file space on these old CDs. So it's like, all right, well, we'll just put a 3rd disc in there. I want to say it's like half of disc 1 is just cutscenes. Like in terms, not literally, like it still has the game on it too.
Right.
But the reason they had to move to disc 2 when they did is just like, oh, the cutscenes ate up that much of the disc. And then disc 3 has like one really nice cutscene towards the end. And it's kind of the same thing here, but it is very funny because I remember that bit specifically, and it's just, I don't know if people, this is a fun bit of movie trivia. I don't know if people remember the first Deadpool movie got greenlit because they did a bit of test footage. Like the director of the first Deadpool movie used to work in CG, like in video game cutscenes, like that. He used to do that. And so he had a CG team put together their pitch for like, this is what a Deadpool movie could look like. So the original pitch footage for Deadpool was voiced by Ryan Reynolds, but it was all CG. But it is, if you go back and find it, you can find it online, it was leaked. That's how the movie got made, is they pitched it, they got shot down, someone leaked it, and the internet was like, this looks great, why did you cancel this? The studio's like, all right, fine, we'll throw some money at this stupid Deadpool movie. And then it made a bunch of money, and now look where we're at. But you go back and watch that Deadpool, like the leaked footage, it's like, it takes a second for you to go, wait, that is CG. Like, because it's the first like 30 seconds is just Deadpool in the suit. So it takes a second for it to, oh no, that's computer generated. It looks nice. And that's what I was kind of reminded of when I saw him, like that specific clip where like the plate's falling, where it's like, they didn't build like a set and blow it up, right? Like there's that, they just for whatever reason, they spent that much money. And it's a kind of a similar thing. Like I said, in those last couple of cutscenes specifically, like the very last cutscene, the character models are insane. Like they don't, like you said, when they did the PS5 version of the game, like, doesn't feel like that big of an upgrade. It's because you have scenes like that where you're like, I didn't know we had the tech to do that. Like, I didn't know we could do that. And it's like, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it looks great, but it's so jarring how how stylistically different it is from the rest of the game you've been playing, because it's like, oh, now we're just watching like a Hollywood budget movie here for a minute.
You almost half expect them to turn around and be like, so we're making another Final Fantasy movie that we're releasing in the theaters. Because it's like, that's why they did the first couple they released to the Spirits Within, which didn't do great at all, or Advent Children, which also didn't do great, but like went over slightly better because it wasn't pretending to be a real movie like Spirits Within.
Right.
It's because they had gotten their like cutscene department built up so well. They're like, you guys do like all our nice CG for our video games. Like, yeah, it's like, you guys want to direct a movie? Like, just do a movie? Because we can. We have like the setup to make like these nice animated scenes and whatnot. And I'm like, I half expected them like in the past couple of weeks to be like, so we're gonna make another film because we've built up our technology enough again, and we want to give it another shot because it looks stunning. Before we wrap up, last time we talked about this game, you had not played the Yuffie DLC. Have you played it since?
Yes.
Okay.
I did play it. It was like right after I got my PS5, so it's been a few years at this point.
Yeah.
I just kind of like, I don't really remember much. I remember kind of the final fight. I remember Yuffie as a character. Just being
that's the main thing.
Yeah. She seems great.
Yes, I'm very much especially looking forward to her interacting with Cloud, just because I'm like, oh, he'll not be able to stand her. Like, she'll be so annoying.
No, I remember playing it and being like, oh yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake had like really good combat, and this game looks incredible.
That was the main thing I actually wanted to touch on, which is that was really sank it in for me, in that, because in the base game I just thought maybe it was a limitation. In Remake, in Intermission, the DLC, that's when I went, oh, there is like a rule they have for themselves that they will not have a playable character who wasn't playable in the original game, because what's his face he's a command thing, basically. You cannot control it. You only control Yuffie. Yeah. But that was also where I went, okay, they're absolutely doing like some sort of team up move, like going forward, because it was such a fun mechanic, like her little combo moves she could do with him. Yeah. And I was correct, because that's been one of the big pushes they've been talking about this time. It's like, yeah, there's different combos for every character and all this sort of fun stuff. On most of my little group chats, my picture right now is Aerith sunglasses for her and Barrett's.
Oh yeah. I saw that. You might have been you that posted it where I saw it, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's
a nice mechanic. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, I hope they bring back Fort Condor because I enjoyed that, but I am very glad they brought back the team up mechanic, because it's like, it was weird. It's just like, well, we'll give you a guy so you have like the party mechanics of the original. You can't play as him though. However, in trade-off, we are going to give you this really fun like combo move mechanic, and it's like, I do like this a lot, actually. I'm glad it's coming back for the full game.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So I feel like we've picked this game apart pretty thoroughly. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. We depending on what kind of podcast we were doing, we could probably spread this out across a whole series. But for this one, are you ready to move into our verdicts for this game? So the way that we rate games on the podcast and our YouTube channel, the Effing Gamers Review Scale, is that we use the classic video game rating scale. It's also the scale you should know from school, which is like A through F, except that above A we have S. S is a masterpiece. F is hot garbage. So for me, I'll go first. From like, the heart and soul of this game is the combat, and it's so good that it carries and helps me move past some of the bloat and like the grunting that we referred to and things like that. But because of some of those things that do hold it back a little bit, for me, this is like a really solid B, probably like a B plus video game. I've kind of referenced the fact that I feel like if they would have leaned into the linearity and made this just like a straightforward kind of A to B story, it might be a little bit stronger experience. But I still am really enjoying my replay of it. I love the combat, the materia system. I'm very excited to see where the series goes from here, both gameplay wise and story wise, depending on, you know, how they move forward with the whole remixing thing. Caleb, what about you?
I am mostly in agreement. I'm going to put it at an A. Like I said, the first time I played it, the first half I was ready to be like, oh shoot, I think this is like an S tier. This is like one of the greatest games ever made. I do think it's got a handful of issues. Not enough to keep me from like really loving the game. And since this is how I kind of got to know the world of Final Fantasy VII, it's always going to have like a warm, fuzzy place in my heart. So it's definitely an A. I do hope they just keep getting better from here. I'm very much looking forward to the next one. I think the combat's really good. I think the writing is actually surprisingly strong. Like the dialogue can sometimes be clunky, but the characterization is really, really good here. But yeah, my big hope, because they've really pushed for the next one and presumably the one after. They've actually more or less said we're actually a little worried about the one after it, not in terms of they can pull it off, but because they're keeping the open world from the second one, and so adding in even more stuff and all that sort of whatnot for 3 is going to be, they said, a challenge. I really hope, since they are pushing the open world angle with the sequels so much, that it's like, okay, but your side quests are going to be good this time, right? Like they're going to be like not.
We'll see.
Well, they're not going to be just basically fetch quests that you've dressed up with cutscenes to go like, you know, just like in The Witcher. I'm like, that was not why anyone liked The Witcher side quests, man. That was not it. So, really high scores for me. Room to improve, though. There are some things I would very much like them to tweak, and hopefully it only gets better. I'm really interested to see where they take the story. Which,
yeah, for sure, that's definitely like one of the main reasons to keep an eye on this series. Cool. Well, that is it for our Final Fantasy VII Remake episode. I'm sure we'll be doing a Rebirth one in the future. Who knows when exactly that will hit. But Caleb, it's been a minute since you've been on the show. Do you have anything that you want to shout out or plug as we bring this thing to a close?
Sadly, at the moment, no. I have been working on a couple of things, and I had hoped at this point to be like, actually, you guys can check this out. But my goal... I'm working with some other people on a thing, and my goal was to be like, I'm going to be out by the end of last year. That didn't happen. And right now we're all in a position where just so much stuff has happened over the past couple months that we're like, we'll see if it does happen. But hopefully I'll have more to talk about at a future point if ever I'm back on here to talk about. At the moment, just anyone wants to follow me, I'm still on Twitter, or X as it's going by these days. CJ Van Ice. I'll probably post thoughts there occasionally. I'll be around.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to hear Caleb's voice and thoughts on some other content, we've had him on for our God of War Ragnarok episode, had him on for Kirby. Were you on for Metroid Dread? Did I do that with you?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
yes,
you were.
You did.
Yeah,
no,
so
I remember that specifically because I'm like, I've talked about Metroid Dread a lot. I liked Metroid Dread. I'm like, I was on the podcast for Metroid Dread? But one of the clips came up across my TikTok the other day, and I was like, that's my voice. I'm like, why am I coming out of my TikTok? It's like, oh, that's me.
Yeah, so we have some other episodes for sure in the feed if you want to go back and hear some more of Caleb's thoughts on video games. As far as the effing gamers, if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating or review. All those things really help on the podcasting feeds if they allow it to get us into those algorithms and get the show out to more people. As far as keeping up with us, Discord is the best way. The link will be in the description. We are also on social media, TikTok, Instagram, all those great things, X. But Discord is the place to actually come have conversations, hang out, talk with people like Caleb who are in
I was
there.
going to say, I'm there occasionally.
Yeah, so it's a good place to hang out with us and our community and guests who have been on the show. The biggest plug I have right now is me personally. For one thing, definitely go follow us on YouTube. We are posting our podcast episodes there now. We also do reviews and rankings and fun videos and things over there. But I have launched my own personal YouTube channel where I am hoping to provide a resource for parents who have kids that play or want to play video games, or parents who are gamers themselves and are, hoping to share that hobby with their kids. So it is called The Parent's Guide to Gaming. It launched just a few days ago as of recording this, but it will have been out for probably a few weeks by the time you're hearing this. So if you haven't seen that yet, if you're interested in that, definitely go check it out. I would greatly appreciate a follow and any feedback that you might have. That is it for this episode. Caleb, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a lot of fun geeking out about Final Fantasy VII. It's such a unique experiment in the gaming space. It's a lot of fun to talk about.
Yep. The only problem is going to be we're all excited. We got a new one due out in a couple weeks. About a week or so after this will probably be out. We'll beat it. We'll talk about it, and then it's going to be like 3 years before we get to do this again.
Exactly. Yep. Well, whenever we finally do get around to recording a Rebirth episode, I'm sure we'll probably have to have you back on. Maybe even bring Alex back in, depending on where we're all at in our lives and whatnot. Yeah. But you, the listener, thank you so much for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate it. And we will catch you on the next one.